Story 1. I had sciatica and plantar fasciitis at the same time about a year ago. The constant pain made me alter my normal way of walking, and after months of walking differently, it also affected my knee and back. It was honestly the most painful year of my life. Story 2. Migraines. The pain gets so intense it becomes the only thing I know. I cannot think of any other thought. I lose the ability to answer simple questions like what my name is. I cannot even move my body. Story 3. When I was 9, another kid I was playing with stomped the edge of a skateboard, and it accidentally slipped forward towards me. It made my front tooth go up higher into my skull, then fell out whole. I felt my whole nervous system shock me. It was the most excruciating pain I've ever felt in my life. I couldn't believe how much pain the human body was capable of feeling. I get the chills just thinking about it, not to mention the blood. There was so much blood. All the kids were freaking out. It was my fresh adult tooth too, so now I have a fake tooth. Story 4. I tried to pick up a case of water once, felt my back pop a little, and went on about my day thinking nothing of it. The next morning, I couldn't get out of the bed. My back hurt so much that I physically couldn't move or turn my body. It took almost an entire week for me to be able to move normally again. It was worse than the time I accidentally sliced my finger open and had to be stitched up. Story 5. Being on fire as a kid was really painful until my nerve endings died. So that's one, but maybe worse is I had a nerve pinched in my neck, which made my arm feel like it was being crushed in a vice, and it felt like this constantly for a month or more. I went to physiotherapy and I don't know what helped, but I suspect stop slouching at your desk helped the most. I swear, if you get a pinched nerve, it is the worst. Story 6. Period cramps. For the most part, they have been fine and like normal. Usually, it is painful but tolerable and nothing a heating pad and ibuprofen cannot fix. About a year or so ago, I woke up and had the worst cramps of my life. I could not do anything but lay on the floor and scream in pain. This lasted a good 4 to 6 hours, and I had to be rushed to the hospital to figure out why they were so bad. Story 7. A cavity that became very severe finally broke, resulting in a large piece missing from the top and front. Nerve pain is very unpleasant, especially when it is in your mouth. Take care of your teeth. Story 8. Run over by a truck. 19 broken bones, a punctured lung, and a concussion were the major immediate injuries. It actually did not hurt at first, not even for the first hour or two while the first responders were opening the car with the hydraulic rescue tool. I passed out from lack of oxygen during extraction, thankfully. But the morphine dose was not correct, or I did not process it normally, and I overdosed and went into respiratory arrest. The pain was so severe my son-in-law told me he could hear me screaming when he got off the elevator. They put me in a medically induced coma for several days. I was on 3 different pain medications for 6 months, and the first 4 months were hell, pure hell. Never-ending pain, only dulled. Story 9. This story is funny and long, so stay with me. In college, I had an accident that left my teeth fractured. I was in and out of hospitals for 6 months to get them fixed. Obviously, I could not eat or chew anything, so for the first month, I was only allowed a liquid diet. Since I had other injuries, I was also bedridden and heavily relied on pain medication. After the first month, I switched to semi-solid foods, and it wasn't until my surgeon reminded me that I realized I hadn't had a bowel movement in a month, or maybe it was 2 weeks, I don't know, but it was long. They put me on laxatives, and my parents kept urging me to go to the bathroom. I always felt the urge, but nothing was coming out. Finally, one day I had enough. I went into the bathroom, squatted, and literally tried so hard to relieve myself. I remember screaming with tears on the floor, and embarrassingly, my parents were patiently waiting outside because that's all they could do. Finally, I had to use my fingers to help, and the stool came out in pieces. I swear it was black in color and as hard as a rock. That was also the day I realized I was not equipped for anal intercourse. Story 10. Calf cramps at night, calf cramps when I wake up. So bad that I can't stay straight and was bending forwards and barely walking. The first days after putting my braces on, I experienced this, but now I understand why it was worth it. Story 11. Probably not even the worst, But one time I fell off my longboard and just rolled down the hill, all scuffed up. The only thing I could do was tell myself I still had to make it home. Story 12. Oral surgery to remove impacted bicuspids when I was 16. The local anesthesia wore off, and I could feel the scraping and bone crunching reverberating through my skull as my teeth were pulled out. Story 13. Burned all the skin off my foot with boiling water. This wasn't the most painful part. That happened a few weeks later when the nurse pulled off the bandages too early and with it all the skin again. Story 14. Kidney stone. The first one had me dry heaving and lying on the floor in the fetal position for hours before I went to the hospital. It sounds not so bad, but it was genuine agony. Second place, frostbite. Or rather, when my frostbitten fingers thawed enough that I could feel the pain again. I passed out from that pain very briefly. Kidney stones still win though. They genuinely redefined my pain scale, adding herniated disc here, but to be honest, it wasn't that bad. Mine caused numbness far more often than pain. I probably wouldn't have actually gone to the doctor for a while if it was just pain, but not being able to feel the back of my arm or some fingers. Yeah, that got me to go to the doctor. Had a cervical spinal fusion done not too long after that. Also, gout was unpleasant. But shortly after that, I experienced and was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and that was worse. I woke up and my ankle was so swollen and painful that I thought I somehow broke it in my sleep. Ended up getting diagnosed with fibromyalgia as well a few years ago. I don't recommend it, I can say that. Story 15. When a herniated disc crushed the nerves to my right leg, it literally felt like the whole leg was being crushed. I was 49 at the time and I screamed in pain for 2 full days, and no matter how much morphine they put in my veins, it didn't help. The nerves got permanently damaged, and today I lack sensation in large parts of my right leg, and my brain registers my right leg as being significantly smaller than the left. I limp because when I walk, my right foot hits the ground sooner than my brain thinks it's supposed to. Story 16. Kidney stones before and during passing them. After having experienced it the first time, the second time around I knew exactly what the pain was. It's not one you forget. Story 17. I know it sounds silly, but a sex headache. Just laying pipe, then suddenly I'm hit with a debilitating pain like nothing I've ever felt. Instantly fell to the ground and curled up, covering my ears. Every light and sound was like daggers through my head. I actually thought I was having an aneurysm and my girlfriend was seconds away from calling an ambulance, but it faded away slowly. It was crazy though. I was completely incapacitated from the pain. Story 18. Ye old tooth infection. I truly felt my sanity slipping on my way to the emergency room. All I could do was rock back and forth weeping. Fastest I've ever been through an emergency room. Story 19. Electric shocks are the worst in my opinion. When I was young, I unscrewed a light bulb and put my finger in and turned the switch on. I was shaking for minutes after. Ever since, I can't even stand an electronic fly killer. Story 20. An emergency surgery 1 week after my tonsillectomy at 18, the scab in my throat came off and started hemorrhaging. My mom drove me to the hospital as my throat continually filled with blood. Once at the hospital, my doctor had to operate without anesthesia in order to save my life. I can still smell the flesh in my throat burning as he cauterized the open wound. It took about 45 minutes of operating. Going to the dentist now is a nightmare for me. Story 21. I have complex regional pain syndrome in my left arm and hand, and it migrated to my right foot, then my left foot. Before I got spinal cord stimulators and my right cocktail of medications, I was bedridden for years. If a stray hair fell on my arm, it was excruciating. It would feel like boiling hot, electrifying glass shards were being smashed into my nerves. Story 22. I had surgery a few years back to fuse 11 vertebrae in my back. The pain for a few years beforehand was unlike anything you can possibly imagine. Take the pain from one slip disc and push that out to 11 at once, then add in 4 or 5 dislocated ribs most days. Story 23, highest pain level, bone marrow biopsy, a needle to the center of your bone to collect the marrow. Worst to cope with, again, bone pain from a shot called Neulasta to boost your immune system, causing your bone marrow to go into overdrive producing white blood cells, making them all very sore. The first was a much higher level of pain, but only for an instant. This one was for several months. Story 24. Breaking my knee. It took 17 screws to patch it back together. I don't remember it though. That memory got blocked even though I was apparently conscious. Story 25. Severe diverticulitis, a vertical fracture in a rear molar, and second and third degree burns on my hands all rank way up there for me. I've also broken 3 different fingers, my right arm, and a big toe. The broken bones didn't hurt as much as the diverticulitis or the molar. The burns didn't hurt as much as those two either. It just lasted a lot longer and was generally miserable, not being able to fully use my hands. Story 26. Sounds insignificant in comparison to everyone else's experiences. But the worst pain I've ever felt was definitely a severely ingrown toenail. I cried and screamed just putting pants on because they would touch my toe. Story 27. It's not really the pain itself. It's really the circumstance I was in. I had a really bad ingrown toenail and I kicked my wall in my sleep, which sliced open the entire side of my toe and bled everywhere at 3 a.m. I was supposed to be waking up in another hour for work, and once I stopped the bleeding, the pain was so bad I couldn't sleep. I took about 5 painkillers and went to work in a labor job for 10 hours before going to a doctor. Story 28. 1. The Pitocin-induced birth of my 3rd child. 2. Kidney stones took 9 days to pass. 3. Cesarean section I wasn't completely numb for and the subsequent recovery. 4. A broken toe, laugh out loud. In that order. Story 29. The painkiller needle for a biopsy of the kidneys. It's very short because the painkiller instantly numbs, but for 3 seconds it feels like your insides are melting. Story 30. From a hockey puck shot straight at my ankle. Stepped in as someone was shooting it, and my ankle took the full force of a slap shot. Couldn't walk properly for 2 weeks. Story 31. Cramped calves after stretching. Not sure what causes it, but I almost called an ambulance because I was crying in so much pain. I've been very careful ever since. I don't stretch my calves fully, and when I feel slight pain, I stop, then slowly try again. I found that pushing through the pain and slowly walking on your calves relieves the pain as well. Again, I don't know what causes it, and this is the first time it has happened to me. I'm Kshujeste. Send help. Story 32. I had both big toenails removed, and the time between the anesthetic running out and the painkillers kicking in seemed like a lifetime of pain shooting up my legs. Story 33. Biopsy of a lymph node under my collarbone. It was supposed to be a quick jab with a medical device, but the doctor couldn't reach it with that. Instead, he had to manually jab me with a needle 12 times to collect the samples. 6 needles, 12 jabs each without anesthetic. Story 34. Broken kneecap. Tripped over a dock plate while locking up the warehouse I worked at. Split the skin open and snapped the bone in half. Drove my manual transmission Jeep to the doctor. Brutal. Story 35. I had mouth swelling full of canker sores that traveled down my throat. I couldn't eat or drink anything with salt or sugar without it burning my mouth and throat. Story 36. A stingray sting to the foot was my worst physical pain for about 35 minutes before I got it in really hot water. At its peak, it felt like a burning hole was developing in my foot and made my calf cramp. Once it was in hot water, it was bearable. Story 37. Kidney stones had them a couple of times 10 to 15 years ago, and they caused this constant pain that wouldn't go away. Even had to go to the emergency room once because of it. Ended up urinating 1 stone out. Never want to experience that again. Story 38. I had a rib near my heart pop out of place. Felt like a heart attack and was so painful I had to sit down and almost passed out. Edit, or migraines. Story 39. Gallstones. Felt like someone was crushing my diaphragm for 4 straight hours. 3 months before I had it removed, I was having attacks a couple of times a week. About 10 days before it was removed, it had increased to a daily occurrence until my gallbladder was removed. Nothing helped with the pain. I do not recommend. Story 40. Miscarriage pain and then ectopic pain. I honestly can't decide which one was worse. Probably the ectopic because it went on for hours. The miscarriage pain was cured within 20 minutes with Tylenol. I I remember lying in bed both times thinking this was the end. Period cramps don't bother me anymore. Story 41. Giving birth was pretty bad. Even if I sneezed all my kids out. The pressure that opens your hips when they engage makes it feel like you'll rip in two. Had 3 8-pound chonkers though, your mileage may vary. At least it took less than 10 minutes. Close second is infection from wisdom teeth surgery. Holy crap. Story 42. It doesn't last too long, but as a sedentary person, when I stretch my calves too much, I can feel a rip or something followed by the most intense pain imaginable. Story 43. When I was a kid, I underwent surgery that required a nerve block in my leg. When I woke up, everything seemed fine and I was discharged. However, on the long car ride home, it became increasingly clear that something was very wrong. My pain medications were wearing off, but it wasn't the outside of my leg that hurt, the surgery site. It was the inside. It felt like thousands of fire ants were gouging chunks out of my flesh. It gradually got worse. Imagine the pins and needles sensation you get when your foot falls asleep and dial it up past the point of all reason. My parents told me I was being dramatic and that pain was normal after surgery. I was pretty incoherent at this point and had no clue what was happening. So I just silently cried and rocked myself in place until we got home hours later. I went straight to bed and eventually, the pain waned enough for me to sleep. In the morning, the pain was manageable, but I had lost all sensation in my inner thigh. Turns out, the nerve block had permanently damaged the nerve. This is rare, and what I'd felt was essentially my nerve dying. I regained some sensation over the years, but it still affects me over 2 decades later, and it formed my reference point for when doctors ask me to rate my pain from 1 to 10. It is never a 10.